Okay, so I'm going to talk to you about the topic which is slightly similar to the previous one, but as I see through the course of our discussion that we follow from the global to more local. So the first presenter was talking about the display of climate changes at the level of urban climates and microclimates. And the second presentation was about the green and blue infrastructure opportunities under climate changes. And I'm going to talk specifically about the ecosystem services which can be provided under urban conditions, under climate change pressure, at the context of other factors which may have influence on the environmental condition at the territory of cities. So you see the title on the first slide, and I'm not going to talk much for the introduction because much was already said, but I would like to briefly go through the general idea of my presentation. So all the ecosystem services, which are benefits which we get from the nature, roughly divided into utilitarian and life sustaining. Those which are utilitarian basically mean products and materials and some other things which we can sell and get profit, or which we can use and which are necessary for our well-being. And the life-sustaining services are those which create the environment, safe environment for our life. And in these terms, the question of urban ecosystems' ability to provide these ecosystem services is very crucial and very complicated in terms of changing environments and changing reality. So the ecosystem services in any case will be based on supporting services, providing regulating services, and then cultural and provisioning services. And here in the formation of the final outcome, we see that humans directly consume provisioning and cultural services. They depend on regulatory services, and they exist due to supporting services just like any other living organism. However, the humans are interacting with nature in the process of ecosystem services formation. Actually, the ecosystem services are understood as something which we get in the point where we are. So no people, basically no perception of ecosystem services. They exist, but they are not perceived. And so the humans, due to their existence and the form of their activity, define the context in which ecosystem services are formed. They are also able to define which ecosystem services providers will be working, and they affect the consumption of ecosystem services. As a result, at the edge of interaction between humans and between the nature, we have the situation when humans define quality, number, and assortment of ecosystem services provided to them. And so if we look at the green spaces available at the planet, we can see that they are the basic element which provide the ecosystem services. And the natural plant associations provide the whole range of ecosystem services which we can imagine. And in terms of the green spaces and plant associations which exist in urban areas, the situation is different because we do not use all those services which green spaces can provide to us at urban areas. So you see that we don't need much of the provisional services, and we are more keen on cultural services, while the regulatory and supporting services are always present because this is the essence of the of our interaction, and this is the essence of nature processes. However, even here, we don't rely much on the clean water provision by the green plantations, because they do not have this possibility to provide us with this water, just because their condition is not perfect enough. The same story happens to the other components of environment. They are not perfect at urban areas. As a result, we can see that human demand defines which ecosystem services are to be consumed by the urban citizens. This doesn't mean that the other services are not taking place. They are, but they are not valued and not praised. So here comes the most important paradox of interactions between humans and nature. So obviously, the more natural, more resilient plant associations are able to provide more ecosystem services. But we do cut these forests for our needs and try to support the artificial or semi-natural plantations within urban territories, which are not able by their nature to provide all spectrum of ecosystem services. And so here we see the context in which we have to exist. And the next thing which appears to be is that within the range of all the ecosystem services, we now in need for new group of ecosystem services. These are adaptation services, and they must be provided by green and blue spaces of urban areas. So the adaptation services basically provide a set of ecosystem processes which help us adapt to changing environment conditions and to mitigate the negative factors and impacts which arise from these changes. It is also the hope to receive some benefits from changing environment through some new economic and environmental opportunities. And these both components interact in the production of more safe environment, protected from extreme weather phenomena with cooler and better atmosphere. And so this must be provided, as I said, by green and blue infrastructure of the city. And the adaptation services are not completely new. It is a reorganization of those natural processes taking place at urban areas so that we are able to receive new benefits. Maybe it is also possible to say that we hope to see these services as in addition to all of those that are already available. And so the quality of these services, all of those services, including adaptation services, is dependent on the human activity, especially at urban areas. And so the first and foremost is that humans, by their activity, affect on diversity and abundance of ecosystem providers, species and populations of organisms which are able to provide services, including those new set of services, adaptation services. The community interactions which appear between organisms at urban territories are also heavily affected by human activity. And in many cases, it is a directional process which ruins existing connections and builds new connections. The key factor for the formation of ecosystem services, as it was said by the previous presenters, is of course the quality of abiotic factors like quality of air, water, and soil. And of course, there happen some fluctuations in the ecosystem services providers. Some seasonal changes and daily changes affect the intensity of ecosystem services provision. And obviously, if we go back to the green spaces, we see that this is not equally, let's say, not normally provided on a regular basis during the whole year, for example. Yes, because most of the year the green areas are green and provide most of their services, but there are at least 5 months at least at our climate, at which they are not able to perform all their functions. The same story happens during daily fluctuations with night and day changes in photosynthetic activity of plants affecting the quality of air. So the context in which the urban green spaces are deemed to provide services is rather controversial. From one side, we see some local issues related to the conditions of urban ecosystem. It's like air pollution, pollution of water, presence of solid surfaces which contribute to increasing temperatures, presence of underground communications, excessive illumination or during nighttime, and intensive mode of any form of green plantations use. These are local effects, but these local effects are over-covered by global pressures like those imposed by climate changes, like increasing temperatures, intensified disasters, heavy rainfalls, or insufficient rainfall, new pests, new diseases, new competing species, and sharp seasonal transitions. Here in Ukraine, we are currently witnessing these sharp seasonal transitions over the last few years. And so all these contexts rather impose threats to the green spaces and their ability to provide services. And so in order to check the situation which is going on now, we have chosen the object for observation. This is the case study of Vidradny Park in Kyiv, as you see from the picture. It is the not too big park, it's only 26 hectares, but it is located in the city center. It is actually the park which joins our university. And in order to follow the changes which take place in green, in this green area, the few complementing actions have been going on. So the first was the inventory of greenery, then the air quality assessment and assessment of these green plants condition. So according to the most of the strategies related to the preservation of green spaces at urban areas and their support, the major starting point is to know what we have. And in order to know what we have, we are currently compiling the inventory of arboreal plants at the territory of Vidradny Park. This is the fragment of this inventory. As you see, it includes all possible information about all trees present at the territory of this park. Here is some data about this inventory. So we have started this inventory in 2017, and we usually involve students of the senior courses to doing this in inventories. And the current number of trees input into this inventory is 529, which is not much, but this is a start. The administration for this inventory is done by my colleague, the associate professor of our department, Eugene Vovsinovsky. And every September, my students and his students are going to amend this inventory database and check what is the situation and what is the condition of all those trees which are included into this inventory. And so currently we have the list of major challenges faced by this specific green plantation. So as you have seen from the picture, probably it is under threat of residential construction. So the buildings, the constructional facilities are expanding and decreasing the area of this park. The next important issue is the diseases propagation and drying of trees. The intensive recreation activity is turning to be a problem because it overuses the available territory for the sport facilities and for the recreation facilities. The territory is in the center of the city. As a result, it has a quite noticeable level of air pollution. And the trampling of soil is also a serious problem, as well as low diversity of these communities, because this plantation is artificial. However, over the course of our observations, which are now already 5 years, we can see that the changes in the area condition is not strong. However, the degradation processes at the territory of this park are, let's say, accelerating. And so we see that there are the global effects of the climate change are the drivers of this situation, but not the local pollution, which, as I said, not much changed over this period. And so the probable effects of climate change on plant association are quite diverse. And we see that both natural and semi-natural communities are affected by both the local anthropogenic pressure from the climate change, and the climate change trends affect the well-being of these plantations. And on the example of the Vidradny Park, we can see the display of these possible effects. So those which are valid for this park are shift in phenophases. First of all, we see that it is at least 11-16 days delayed autumn phenomena and 13-17 days earlier initiation of spring phenomena. We can also see the distribution of tar spot on all maple trees, almost all maple trees in the park. We see the chestnuts and birches going down, let's say, depressed under the pressure of climate changes. And we see that species which have low tolerance to heat extremes, like oak, are disappearing just because they are drying and they are removed from the park during maintenance. And the invasion of new species, both intentional by human activity and non-intentional, are progressing in the park. So our key question was whether this ecosystem is able to provide ecosystem services. And in order to do this assessment, we have chosen 10 parameters: size covered by canopy, diversity of species, percentage of tree species vulnerable to heat extremes, quality condition of communities, areas available for expansion of green spaces, presence of blue infrastructure, number of bird species, soil conditions, quality and diversity of lichens, and habitat unity, meaning the level of fragmentation. All these parameters were rated from 1 to 10 to evaluate the overall ability of this ecosystem to provide ecosystem services. And the total rating was 57. But even more curious to us was what is the major component in the balance of ecosystem services for this specific ecosystem. And so we have rated the parameters of these park as those contributing to cultural services provision and those contributing to adaptation services provision. And as you see from this simple chart, the current locality is more prone to provide cultural services. However, adaptation services are also available. We did the same for a range of green spaces in Kyiv. You see some pictures of them and the rest of those. For all of them, I have mentioned their area. The area seems to be core for the ability to provide ecosystem services, since many researchers believe that there must be at least 2 hectares of a unified green association in order to be able to provide ecosystem services. So all these areas are having the territory over this threshold. And as you see, for those for those facilities which we have assessed, many have more possibilities to provide cultural services than adaptation services. There is no way they will not provide adaptation services, but the balance is in favor of cultural services for some of these parks. However, we can see some of the major parks providing considerably especially adaptation services over the cultural services. And in most of the cases, this was defined not only by the area of this green space, but also by the intensity of recreation activity at this territory. So here comes the question, what will the city do in the face of climate change? So the first way is to increase the number of ecosystem providers. Literally, that means that we will need to increase the number of green plantations. And this is known under the name of nature-based solutions. This was already covered during the presentation of the previous presenter, but I would like to highlight the fact that these nature-based solutions are quite important and efficient because they really increase the number of service providers. Here are the green interventions, public green spaces, vertical greening, green roofs, water-sensitive urban design, river restorations, and bioengineering measures. I will not cover them because we have already discussed them today. However, there are some limitations to these services, and in most of the cases, the expansion of the area of green space will not be equal to the increase of ecosystem services provision, because they are mostly dependent on biodiversity, but not the area itself. And the use of these new green plantations for recreation, and especially active recreation, will decrease the possible ecosystem services we can get. And in many cases, the new plantations are monocultural and devoid of biodiversity. And they, as a result, serve human needs more than the ecosystem services provision purpose, as we see from the previous analysis. And so the idea is important, but under the conditions of modern cities, it's very hard to find free lots for plantations. And if we create pocket parks or mini parks, it's a good idea, but it will not give us real ecosystem services, especially in terms of adaptation services. So in these terms, we believe that, there is a need to move to biodiversity-based solutions based on nature-based solutions. And in this case, we will invest efforts into increasing diversity of the existing communities, and by this we will try to improve the quality of ecosystem services they provide. The diversity of species can be supported by interventions of those tree species which are especially resilient under the conditions of climate change. The drought-resistant grasses must be used for the cover of bold areas. And when the existing green plantations are maintained due to drying or damage of the trees, it is strongly recommended avoid using the same species as they were at this place. This will increase the diversity, and this will give some additional benefits. The other important issue is to use foundation species, meaning high-rise uncommon trees or some semi-shrubs or grasses which can engineer environment for the other species, and this way they will support the diversity. It is not hard to support them because there is not much of them, but they will create real hotspots of biodiversity. And the last issue in this list, but not the least, is of course the support of urban fauna, especially the bird communities. Any ecosystem includes real natural ecosystem, includes some components of animal world, and this is necessary for urban areas. Of course, rewilding is almost impossible. However, there are many things we can do in order to support the other groups of animals which are favorable and beneficial for ecosystems, but not, let's say, dangerous for the residents. And so It is also possible to support the diverse communities at this territory and support not only the trees plantation, but also the wetlands, which have already been mentioned. And what is even more important is that if we are able to create new green areas, these might be connections between the existing areas instead of only creating new spots. The connectivity, as the researchers prove, is sometimes more important for ecosystem services than the number of separate slots. And so based on these possibilities, we see that there are some opportunities given to the urban areas by the climate change. And in particular, this means the arrival of new species. This could be the case that the cities will become refugees for some new species taking advantage of urban better conditions. These might include creation of blue infrastructure, which will additionally provide the habitat for organisms and the cooling effect for the residents. And the change of climate will initiate some successions, the change of some communities. This will also rise the diversity. And by this, we can see that we have lots of opportunities for the increasing diversity at this territory. As you see from this table, we have tried to assess how these parks, which we have analyzed, are good for housing birds communities. And you see that with the list of criteria which we have used, the most of them are have more opportunities to be comfortable for birds populations than it is supposed to be. And under these conditions, there is a need to do some interventions to support the bird communities, because the worst criteria in all of the assessment was the bird supporting elements. And there is some possibility to support the birds populations through the development of supporting infrastructure, information work, and support of some ornithological service at the level of city. It's not even necessary to create it at each object, just at the level of districts, for example. And reservation status of the territory is always in favor for the ecosystem services provision and biodiversity, even if it's not always possible. And the last issue is to support the mosaic character of those communities which already exist. Currently in Kyiv, we see a renovation of many parks and green spaces, which is good, but they try to make these spaces absolutely comfortable for active recreation and other sport activities or something, which is not necessary if we want to support the ability to provide ecosystem services. As you see from this picture, it is a Lake Almazne, which houses 6 different communities. And now it is one of the major providers of ecosystem services at this territory, so it must be preserved in the condition as natural as possible. The same story is by Lake Radunka, which also includes 3 different communities, and which is currently awarded the reservation status, and is supposed to be a very important source of ecosystem services, including adaptation services, for the developing residential area at which it is adjoined. And to finish my speech, I would like to say that this is a developing issue, and maybe we should invest efforts in finding new solutions which are smarter and at the same time less intrusive than the common things which are usually done for the support of urban ecosystems safety. Okay, thank you very much for your attention.